Hi everyone. Thanks for joining Tour Circle's 0 to 1 event this Wednesday. It happens to be the 40th episode of 0 to 1. As you know, we've been running 0 to 1 for now many weeks, and there are two versions, one on Wednesdays and another on Thursdays. Wednesdays, we touch on global topics, and then on Thursdays, we still touch on global topics, but also with some relevance to India and South Asia. And today our speaker is Ranuk Mendis. Ranuk is the founder and CEO of Enprivacy, a company that he formed 2 years ago to tackle challenges of privacy with products as well as consultancy. But I'll let Ranuk introduce his company in a bit. And thank you very much, Ranuk, for accepting our invitation. And also thanks to everyone who has joined to listen in today as well. Ranuk, just to start off, maybe it might be useful for our audience if you introduce yourself. I know you worked in tech for a long time, in counterterrorism at one point, then in threat intelligence at another point, and then in privacy at another stage. And then you moved on to start your own company as well. In that long journey, I was also working with you for maybe 5, 6 years as well at Meta together. So I know some parts of your work, but it'll be interesting for our founders and freelancers, consultants joining today if you introduce yourself and explain a bit about your journey, and then you can also start your presentation after you introduce yourself.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Yasas, and thank you to you as well as the Doers Circle team for having me today on the 40th episode to speak about, I think, something that is crucial at this juncture as well. To everyone who is tuned in, really appreciate you all coming along. My name is Ranuk Mendis. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Enprivacy, and like Yasas said, I do come from a privacy background. Yasas and I go way back to the early days of Meta, where we both worked on multiple risks, privacy being one. I've been in the data privacy space for about a decade, way before it was the talk of the town, way before people were interested in their data as of such. I won't go through my whole experience, but something that I've seen is how much the space has transformed, especially with the boom in AI in the last couple of years as well. Now, Yasas and I have worked in large tech companies where they sit on large scale levels of data. And more or less how that has transformed and now coming on to other industries and other mid-tier companies as well. Just to share a couple of my learnings as to how we see the market is going, and so on and so forth. Now, Enprivacy as an organization, what we hope to do or we aim to do is to establish and build guardrails around privacy, especially in the years of AI, ensuring that organizations can go out and build comprehensively, knowing that they're not risking or putting any of their sensitive data at risk from an organizational standpoint. We are here to protect organizations, but also we're here to protect your clients, the people who trust you with the data that they give you as well. And that's how kind of we have come together as an organization to do so as well. With that, Yasas, am I okay to kind of share my screen and begin?
Yes, please. Yeah, please share your screen and present your slides, and then you can present that. Yeah.
Just bear with me for 2 seconds and I will. Okay, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, all good.
The only reason I have a few slides is more or less to kind of set the standard as to what we are seeing, more or less from the work that we are doing and the organizations that we're working with. Now, just kind of taking a backtrack, we've obviously understand that we are in a huge transformation period comes to the use of AI and LLMs. We've seen organizations shipping out products much faster than they used to, and we've understood there's a lot of organizations, a lot of companies now testing on LLMs using AI in their day-to-day as well. Now, in the using of the use of AI and LLMs through within organizations, what we've understood is there's a lot of data that is being used in the testing of some of these LLMs as well. Going in a little bit more, I would say as part of this whole AI gold rush that is happening, and that we see that organizations are kind of taking forward. What we also see is that there is a lot of sensitive data that is being used. Organizations don't have complete control over data being used in LLMs or in AI as they go along as well. What we've understood is that organizations use a lot of unstructured data sets and structured data sets that have personally identifiable information, sometimes client data or personal data for that matter, that actually goes out into these LLMs. Now, as an organization, and just kind of picking on in my experience, I have seen both the good side as well as the ugly side of this as well. Now, in regards to using sensitive data, especially in the years of AI and using models like ChatGPT or so on, what is happening there is that you are losing complete control and oversight over your data as well. Now, a lot of organizations have a lot of security architectures within their companies that help to protect data as of such. But with the use of some of the newer LLMs, some known and some unknown, there is a complete kind of open gate when it comes to access to sensitive data within organizations, which is quite concerning. We've seen companies that have gone through their own personal data breaches, especially through the use of untested LLMs. Let it be credit card numbers to bank information, to more a little bit more technical things like API keys as of such. Now, the compliance landscape has changed holistically. 98% of the world is now covered by data privacy laws, as we can see. And what we've seen with that is that there is now more focus onto the use of AI and governance as well. Regulators are now catching on. And in the last 6 to 7 months, we've seen a lot of companies actually pull back from the use of AI and the use of LLMs within their organizations. Now, this has been a huge hit on productivity and efficiency. Obviously, as this what I like to call a transition period that is occurring right now, a lot of organizations want the ability to actually use LLMs in their day-to-day. But the reason that they can't empower their employees is because they don't have complete control and oversight over that use of LLMs as well. In this whole particular area, or this open kind of conversation, the biggest concern here is that there is sensitive data that is being leaked to these LLMs without having complete control oversight from organizations as well. Now, in our work, some of the risks that we see, obviously, with this is the privacy debt. It is like technical debt. It's not something that will bite you then and there. But if there was to be a data breach as of such, or data being impacted, then yes, there will be a huge impact on something like this. So data breaches is a huge concern. It is something that needs to be taken into consideration when building on LLMs or AI. And that's something that we see that organizations usually don't pay attention to, especially when you're in a startup stage. I think security and privacy is an afterthought where you actually think about it, once your product is live and launched. The second is the actual regulator. We've seen regulators come down hard, not only in this region, but globally. In the European markets, we have seen some of the larger, LLM providers also have their own privacy concerns as well. Now, what we've told kind of when we speak to founders and we speak to new companies that are, building fast and accelerating really quick, especially in highly regulated organizations like the fintechs, the health tech companies, and so on, that actually dabble in very sensitive data. What we kind of tell them is to ensure that they're building on privacy at a design stage to ensure that they're not putting any of their sensitive data at risk at the same time. Some of the other risks, I think it is one of the most obvious ones, is if you are impacted by a data breach, and your clientele, especially as a company that is growing, your clientele understand that data breaches come from your end, there is highly likely a huge PR risk that will come with it as well, for an organization in that sense. So, like I said, more than a technical debt, the privacy debt can have large impacts on organization. The risk matrix varies from legal to PR to having a large impact on the organization as well, and it is something to kind of think about. A lot of the kind of companies that we work with that play in a heavily regulated market, we've seen the impact of some of these areas as well, where a simple example of a representative of the company, a sales representative of the company, using a LLM model to to write their normal kind of marketing and sales requirements, and using sensitive data that is leaked. Once that data kind of leaves your organization or leaves your architecture, an organization doesn't have complete control or oversight over it, and that is something that is kind of concerning us from a risk standpoint as well. Now, when we speak about LLMs, or when we speak about kind of the use of AI, we only think about the large scale providers that everyone knows, from ChatGPT to Gemini and so on. But a lot of engineering teams, for an example, are using some of the most unknown products to actually test some of the IP and code that is coming in some of their applications as well, where there's a lot of sensitive data being leaked at the same time. Organizations do use the mechanics of actually redacting this information manually, but then we have also seen it hit out heavily on productivity and efficiency as well, and hence why we've seen a slower growth from a productivity standpoint, or adopting standpoint rather, when it comes to the use of AI and LLMs within the organization. So the way we see it, like I said, just kind of wanted to establish a foundation before we take this conversation forward, and happy to hear thoughts and discussions, questions as well at the same time. What we encourage organizations to do is, building privacy as an advantage and not looking at it as kind of a compliance checklist, as part of kind of you're required to do. We've seen organizations that have built with privacy by design, ensuring that they are protecting the sensitive data that they're testing on, ensuring that they're protecting the data that actually goes out into LLM. They have a good understanding and oversight over what that data looks like. Don't test your models on your sensitive data. You are able to actually use some of this. You're able to kind of use synthetic data at a very early stage. You don't want to be giving out your crown jewels very early on in that sense. The second is making sure that you have a complete understanding of what kind of data that you hold within the organization, making sure that you have the right policies in place so that they align with your whole overall process as an organization as well, and more or less establishing and building a culture of privacy within your organization. I couldn't kind of say that even more, with its engineering teams, your sales teams, and marketing teams as well, especially with the use of AI, to be on top of ensuring that the data doesn't leak, because we feel like that would be the weakest element within the organization. Making sure that no one's using tools or third-party tools that are not pre-approved by the organization as of such, or establishing a product that can both anonymize and pseudonymize a lot of the data that is actually going out in the model in that sense. So just to set the standard, that is what we are currently seeing in the market. It is a huge risk that we see, especially with the adoption of AI that has been coming in. We have seen, the modus operandi of a lot of the scams and frauds that we're seeing in the region. End of the day, it kind of comes back to the data points that organizations hold, and those data leaking and going into the wrong hands. Here in Singapore, we have seen a large increase in scams in the last couple of years. And in the past, what we've understood is that data going into the wrong hands, is more or less gold for some of the scammers as well to, come up with phishing tools and so on and so forth. With the use of AI, we have seen that increase as well. Hence why a lot of the regulators now have a focus on AI governance and establishing guardrails around some of these LLMs as well. The space is, I would say, still in transformation when it comes to guardrails, but it's a very basic foundational process and protocol that needs to be kind of established to ensure that, PII data is being protected with the use of LLMs and, your models as well. And at the same time, I think it's also important to kind of establish that framework within your organizations, whether, on a personal level, if you're giving, sensitive data to the LLM models that you're using on a personal level, I would say to, ensure that you are, using it with a sense of awareness where you're taking that information out and redacting that information before it actually goes into that model. A lot of the LLM models do say that they don't train their models on sensitive data, which might be true, but then that is something that we don't have control and oversight on as organizations. And that control and oversight can only come from your perspective, and it is something to kind of keep in mind as well. So with that, Yasas, happy to kind of pass it on to you, just to give you guys a blurb as to what some of the things that we are seeing in the market as well.
Thank you very much, Ranuk. Maybe we can stop sharing as well.
Yeah,
and we can get into the discussion part of the session. And we have few questions already in the Q&A channel, but I would like to start off with a couple of questions from my end.
Yeah.
Ranuk, one of the things that's being discussed in the AI space at the moment is regulations, right? Like how can regulations address some of these concerns? And I'm sure privacy is one of those concerns, right? And when you talk about regulations, we do understand that you can't have one regulation around the world, because regulations are set either in country or at times in blocks of countries, if you talk about something like EU, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to understand, like, where's the regulatory discussion in this space, especially from a privacy point of view? I guess the AI and related regulations is one discussion. Within that, where is the privacy thing? And is there a push to stop personal information and sensitive data going into LLMs?
Yeah, a really good question, Yasa. So the conversation about sensitive data and PI data and the regulation around it is not new. I mean, we saw the from the GDPR coming in. 98% of the world is now regulated by data privacy laws, and quite stringent data privacy laws. So the frameworks from a legal perspective are there. And it's very clear in black and white. Obviously, with the transformation in AI in the last 3 years or 4 years that we have seen, where there's a productivity level, even from non-technical perspectives, from basic day-to-day kind of running of operations. We've now seen some of these, regulation being transformed into AI governance guidelines, because it covers, different aspects of it. Privacy is one huge component and a foundational pillar, but there are other areas which obviously I won't get into today, but, from a hallucination and so on, and making sure your data is ethical and things like that. So the way I see it is, from a privacy perspective, if the regulators wanted organizations, and they do at the moment, to comply when it comes to the use of LLMs, the Data Privacy Acts are already in place. The regulators have already caught on to it. There are certain guidelines and governance protocols, governance processes that they have established for organizations to follow. But in the near future, I do believe that, like in the EU, we saw the AI Act come into play. A lot of the regions will adopt a separate act, which will cover a larger reason, but privacy will be a main pillar. But to answer your question, the regulation is there. So organizations need to start complying, even from an AI transformation standpoint.
And would that mean, if the regulations are in place, absorbing these personal data and sensitive data into LLM models, would that be kind of prohibited, or at least kind of discouraged?
Yeah. So I think the way the regulator, so I'm not a lawyer myself, so I'm not going to give
Yeah,
any legal advice, but the way kind of the regulation is implemented at the moment is that organizations need to stay on top of their personally identifiable information, which is what we categorize as data that can uniquely identify a particular person, so or sensitive data for that matter. And when in the black and white, what that means is that organizations need to have the right governance protocols, the right guardrails, and so on and so forth. So um, from a regulatory perspective, I would say the draft is already there. From an implementation perspective, that would more or less operationalize, um, more or less ensuring that data does not go out into the LLMs, because technically you are breaching that once you put that data out there. It's like more or less giving the data of your organization to a third party without having contractual agreements and processes like you would do if in a particular data transfer. So hence why I said it's like an open gate at the moment. So in the future, at the moment I would say it is mandatory already, but in the future it will be more clear when AI acts and AI governance acts come into play.
sure. Thanks, Ranuk. And just for the audience, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A channel to ask your questions. We have 3 questions already. I'll start picking them quickly. I
Yep.
just wanted to ask one more question before I go to those questions, Ranu, just so that everyone's clear as to what you've built here. So you have LLMs on one side, and then you have the user on the other side. Then you've built a layer in between so that
Yep.
this user doesn't send through PII or this sensitive data into the LLMs. So your layer would kind of guard this as a
100%.
barrier in that sense.
100%. So I didn't want to get into like the nitty gritties of the product today, hence why I kind of left it out of my of the deck itself. But basically, what we've done is we've established a privacy enhancing technology that anonymizes and pseudonymizes a data before it hits a LLM. Now, the easiest way to put it is that we ensure that your PII data does not go out into it. So we protect it within your architecture, but then at the same time, we also give it synthetic data or replacement data that actually goes out into the LLMs. That way, organizations don't have to worry about productivity and efficiency. They don't have to detect that data. You still get the same answers you would, and we ensure that that efficiency is kept as well. So that's what we've done. It will sit as a layer, more or less a middleware within your organization between any LLM model that you're using and the company. And that's how we've kind of set it up, more or less hitting out at the guardrail that is currently needed for organizations to keep building and to keep transforming in this kind of area of AI.
Sure. I would like to pick this second question from our Q&A thread, Ranuk. That's, I guess, one of the preliminary questions that will come in this discussion. Is business sensitive data part of privacy related data for you? I guess if I give more context, at least from my side, PII would be someone's email address, their birth date, things like that, right? Personally important kind of not secret, but at least
Yeah,
important information, right? That you don't want the public to know.
100%.
But then, if you take a business, you're also talking about sensitive data in terms of maybe their revenue, if it's a private company, their employees' details, employees' salaries, and stuff like that. So you have PIIs on one side, and then you have also business sensitive data. So are you talking about both these categories here?
100%. So we look at it from kind of the PII context. Obviously, there's a general standard of what personally identifiable information is in the globe. A lot of the regulators have established frameworks, and so have kind of organizations that work in that space as well. But at that same time, we don't want to miss out on, like you said, some of the more specific nuances, from industry perspective to an organizational perspective as well. So to answer your question, yes, we are talking about data that we consider PII, but also specific data that is, more specific to you, that you feel is sensitive to your organization. Now, in the past, even moving away from LLM, we have the LLM era, I'm going to say, we've seen a lot of the data breaches where there is financial information of organizations, products that have not been launched out being leaked and so on. So we have seen the impact of data like that kind of going into the wrong hands. So technically, as yes, it is important from a personal identifiable information standpoint as well, but it is something that covers business data as of such, and something that companies need to keep on top of. Yes, I think you're on mute. Sorry.
The other question, Ranuk, is the first question. That's why doesn't ChatGPT consider this themselves? I guess this is not only for ChatGPT, for any of those LLMs. Why wouldn't they do it? I mean, I remember having an early conversation with maybe you or someone in our network, and their kind of explanation was that they want as much data as possible to come into the model so that their models are trained as much as possible. So they don't want to cut off PIIs or any sensitive data coming into the model. Would that be the argument here, Ranu?
So the reason, well, it's twofold. Firstly, I don't think any LLM model would want kind of complete control over the data that you're providing them. So, I mean, the guidelines on some of the LLM models, if I can remember, that the text was that they want you to ensure that you're redacting sensitive information before it actually comes into the model. Now, I know that the more recent rhetoric is that a lot of the LLMs don't train on the data that you provide them as well. I think where we come in from is ensuring that organizations have complete control over their data rather than giving it out to an LLM. Once it's outside your organization, you have also given that responsibility to someone else. And if there is no contractual obligation when it comes to that, that I think is a larger concern. So whether, yes, a lot of the LLMs would require a lot of data, and that's how kind of they grow and build as well. And that's how you train a model and we take it forward, right? But then at the same time, organizations or LLM providers are now pulling back that rhetoric to say that, we're not training it on their data. So then the question arises as to, okay, you're just storing my data outside then, what kind of process and protocol do you run in that sense? And the reason I say that, Yasas, is because if you look at any of the regulators or any of the regulation, data transfers or vendor contractual agreements, these are large scale kind of focus areas when it comes to privacy. So that needs to apply more or less in the AI and LLM space as well, which we'll obviously see as a transformation. We will see in the future, but it is something to think about. So to answer your question, will ChatGPT or any of the models do this as of such? I think it's more or less providing the clients or your organization to have complete control, or for the organization to actually be doing it rather than providing it to a third party in this sense as well.
Right. Ranuk, I guess a bit of a deeper question on this would be like, yes, there's a concern in giving these data to LLMs, right? But would your potential clients, your clients question, where is data going with you as well, right? It's yes, you're giving it to LLM. Yes, we see the risk, but you're also a private party, and aren't we giving that data to you, and then you filter and give whatever is filtered out to LLMs? So how would you respond to that?
Yeah. You're trying to put me in trouble. No, I'm joking. But no, so we run a very, very strict process when it comes to handling data. We don't even control or hold data, even in rest. Usually, a product like ours would sit on an enterprise level where we have no control. The organization has complete control over it as well. But if organizations, the mid tiers that require the subscription based one, we run a very stringent security process that there is no data that actually comes to us or that is we are visible to. And there's a purging compliance process that we keep to as well at the same time. So technically, there is no data that sits with us or rests with us or we use. It is completely controlled and owned by the client. That whole auditing and compliance process is controlled by the client as well.
Sure.
But that's a really good question. That is something that does come up. And yeah, I think, like I said, I mean, it's something that I spoke about today, but we practice what we preach, right? So we've established privacy by design at a very early stage, and that's something that we thought about at the early stages of the process. How do we handle clients' data? And that was more or less the initial architecture that has now taken off.
I like the word you used, Ranuk, privacy by design, because we have founders joining today, and also when this goes online,
Yeah,
people would listen to this, and a lot of founders, early stage companies, right? And then that word privacy by design is important for them, because rather than fixing the problem a year later, 2 years
yeah,
later, can you actually put a design in place where you actually consider privacy early on?
yeah.
Are there any tips that you can share with our audience if they're just starting off?
Yeah.
How would you kind of recommend them to think about privacy also in a bit of a serious way? Um, Also, while understanding that they're still building, they're still kind of figuring out, they don't have all the resources and money, especially to implement a lot of tools and maybe even processes. So considering all that, what would you kind of recommend as some tips for them to go about this at an
No,
early
I mean,
stage?
it's a common problem that we see, Yasas, that a lot of kind of founders and companies make in not establishing kind of privacy by design protocols and processes in place. And we've seen organizations that have gone, 3, 4 years and establish a tech stack that has now caught on, and they have about 1,000 to 2,000 clients that have come on board, but then they have to backtrack again and kind of redesign in a way to hit out at some of the security processes and the bugs that they see. Now, that is some of the lighter versions. We've also seen organizations that have gone completely been disrupted and bankrupt because there has been a large scale breach and the data has specifically gone from their platform, which we have. I mean, it's public knowledge. We've seen a lot of companies that happen to as well. Now, in regards to what can I share in regards to privacy by design, even for smaller teams, when I say, establishing it in your architecture is looking at it from a data privacy standpoint from every angle of what we're talking about. If you're training a model using data, make sure that you're focusing on your PII. You have an understanding of what your high risk data is. You've categorized it in a way to ensure that you're building a certain process and protocol to make sure that you are staying on top of that as well. From a compliance angle, driving on a policy standpoint, establishing the right policies that your teams and your employees are actually using as well. Now, privacy by design is something that you more or less market to your clients. We live in a day and age where a lot of the clients that work, a lot of the clients that use platforms require organizations to take that responsibility on. So being able to kind of talk about it from, what kind of processes and protocols you have built to ensure that you're protecting that data is the early stage starting standpoint. And we've seen that, I mean, in the big tech world, it was kind of a day-to-day thing, where we speak about privacy as its own pillar. But now we've seen even some of the startups using that, especially in the fintech space, to say that they have taken privacy as a key component of what they're building, and protecting that data is key as well at the same time. So I think it's a couple of folds. One is obviously, keeping on top of the data that you're using, especially at a creation stage, making sure your platform doesn't have any vulnerabilities. You're not working with third parties, unknown third parties that you're sharing very sensitive data with, little nitty-gritty things that can be done, where you're not putting any of your clients' data at risk. Establishing kind of concrete policies, making your clients aware to say that you have taken this component as well, and you're establishing a framework that is key. I think are key areas for privacy by design, especially with the use of AI and the testing on LLMs. I mean, it is now a no-brainer to actually establish some of these protocols, rather than, throwing unstructured data sets into an unknown model to test, creating a huge vulnerability for the future. And I go back to what I said earlier, it's the trust debt, right? It's not a technical debt, it's a trust debt. It'll come and bite you someday, as we have seen. So it's something to kind of keep in mind.
And the next question that came from our audience, Ranuk, is about industries for whom this is more critical. I guess think of, I mean, I don't want to give the answer for you, but I guess there would be certain industries like the financial sector where this is more critical, I believe, than others. So maybe we can talk about where it's more critical, but I don't think can say it's not critical for anyone else either, though.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, look, there are heavily regulated industries. The no-brainers are obviously the finance industry is a heavily regulated one. Health is another, legal is another one. But we have also seen the ball shift in the last couple of years. Organizations across the board, whether it is, B2C companies or B2B companies, there's a lot of testing that is done on data as well. I think this whole AI transformation stage has kind of widened that scope of how this is run. So we've seen that kind of transition from the regulated industries to now moving into organizations in other industries, even from a consumer retail perspective, wanting to kind of stay on top of this as well. So yes, there are the regulated industries, which are the most obvious ones that hold a lot of the sensitive data. But with the use of AI and the use of LLMs, I feel like that has now kind of transitioned into other specific focus areas as well. So yeah, to answer your question, I don't think there's any organization, unless if they don't hold anything sensitive, which obviously they do, even in their sense, even if it's an organization that is sensitive in their sense, it is more or less a component that they have to start thinking about as its own pillar.
Ranuk, as you talk about the industries, one question that came to my mind is like within these industries or outside those critical industries, I believe, um, like what has the response been like? I guess you've been out talking to these companies over the last 2 years, and ChatGPT and these LLMs also became popular in the last 2 to 3 years. So what's the response like? Like, do they hear you? Or are they like, no, ChatGPT or whatever, DeepSeek, or Claude AI for that matter? I don't want to single out ChatGPT here, uh, or Copilot for that matter. All
Yeah.
these are used by our employees, and we don't have much of a cost on these unless they've taken premium accounts, and they're already using, right? And they're already kind of getting the benefit, whether it's the efficiency, whether it's the, the better narratives that they are developing using these tools, or the presentations that they're doing, whatnot. Right? So are managements hearing you out in the sense like they want to go deeper into this and put these barriers in place or controls in place, or they are more reluctant, they're happy with what they're doing?
So, I mean, a lot of organizations are in that AI transformation stage. We've seen a lot of teams come up in organizations that are more or less their focus is on understanding how companies can transform or their organization can transform using AI and LLMs. I think, look, there was one stage. I mean, you mentioned a lot of the kind of the public LLMs out there, which are quite known, but there are newer models that are coming out testing for different use cases within the organization as well, which you and I would not be using on a day to day. But like with that transformation, like I said, what we did see was that pullback where organizations had to pull back because there was a lot of sensitive data being used. It's a huge security exposure in that sense. So that is where kind of we have come in, and where we see with a lot of the organizations that we work is there's a huge appetite in understanding what the guardrails are like before that AI transformation happens. So a lot of kind of organizations are now a little bit more risk averse than they were 2 years ago with kind of the AI adoption. So yes, to answer your question, they do hear me. They understand that it is a security process that needs to be aligned with their AI transformation roadmaps. And also, I think establishing that kind of goes back to that point about, establishing this by design for them to kind of grow and transform with AI. It is something that is needed at the same time. So the rhetoric, I think, has changed from 2 years ago. A lot of organizations want to make sure that there are certain guardrails in place that protects them while they kind of transform as well. So I think 2 years ago there was a little bit of an open gate. Everyone moved to using it on a daily basis. A lot of organizations, had kind of a free flow of use any tool that you need. Whereas now, they're establishing certain processes that, employees need to follow when it comes to the adoption of AI. So.
Sure. I'll take the last question from the audience, at least in the Q&A thread at the moment. Ranuk, this is from Tarak. Tarak, thanks for hanging in there. You asked this question sometime back at 4:47 my time, but we are just picking it now. How do strong data privacy practices help mitigate financial crime risks, and how can AI and ML be used to support this?
Yeah, a really good question, because this is something that we see heavily in the fintech space. The fraud detection has been a very manual process, a huge manpower process that we have seen that is now evolving to detection using AI and ML and so on. We've worked with kind of fintech companies that are using, AI and ML from a detection perspective to be able to, have shorter turnaround times when it comes to the use of AI. When it comes to the from fraud detection, shorter turnaround times, making sure they are picking up on certain nuances and so on. Now, the biggest risk that we see there as well is for these models to be trained. They are trained on unstructured data sets coming from a client perspective. So definitely there is sensitive data that actually goes into some of these models. From a privacy perspective, we see that as a huge risk. As long as that is remediated and as long as that risk is reduced, where organizations can understand the data that are actually going out into these models, I really do believe that AI can transform the whole AML and CTF space, or the anti-money laundering and counterterrorism financing space as well. I think it'll make things much more quicker to identify scams and so on. But again, coming back to that privacy and security perspective, to make sure that you're protecting your data while you're kind of detecting some of these other risks as well is very important. But yeah, it is a huge space that I think will transform as we go, but it needs to ensure that it has the right guardrails as well in place. Because if you think about it, if there is data that is being breached, end of the day, it does turn into financial crime. If you look at any modus operandi of how, when data is leaked from an organization, how important it is to scammers is to ensure that, they're scamming, clients and so on for financial gain, right? We've seen this in some of the jobs that we have held. We've seen it around the globe as well. So it'll be more or less the same for the fintech world.
Thanks, Ranuk. Tarak, if your question can be more expanded by Ranuk, maybe you can drop another question. But I'm sure Ranuk has covered it well as well. But please ask any more questions. We have 10 or 15 minutes to go as well. And I would like to change the pace of the conversation more on the founder itself, Ranuk, if you don't mind. You've handled many questions on the product itself, on AI, on privacy, regulations, pretty heavy questions, I guess, some tough questions as well. But I would like to move on to your startup journey. And I know you started 2 years ago and you moved from a corporate to a startup environment. We would like to touch on like how you actually came about this idea. I guess now you having explained this, I guess anyone would probably see why you thought about this. But at the time, 2 years ago, how did you spot this opportunity and how did you transition to become or be a founder from a fairly comfortable corporate environment?
Yeah. True. So I think our journey, Yasas, obviously you and I worked closely together as well, but something that we understood very early on, even when I was, part of the early organizations, when it comes to data, there's a lot of context that needs to come into place. Regional nuances have to come into place, especially in the APAC region. We're working with different markets, different industries. I think a big learning from, Facebook itself is how regional nuances and market context, really helps, especially from a privacy perspective as well. I think at the same way, understanding different industries, different industry nuances, complexities that come along in that side kind of sparked my interest, because I felt like, you're sitting on this gold mine of data where organizations are using, but no one understands the actual value of it that they hold till actually something happens. There was a question that was put to me a couple of weeks ago, that when I was doing a panel, that someone asked me, he said, do organizations really do care about their PII? And I said, they only care about it when there's an impact. We've seen it in the region, we've seen it globally as well. So I think that's what kind of sparked my interest in trying to establish, like, okay, how can we give companies complete control over the data that they hold, bringing into context regional nuances, language specific context, industry specific context, not the basic Bill and Bob is a name to a telephone number, so on, really getting into the nitty gritties of the data. And I think that's how kind of Enprivacy came together, is to kind of focus on building a privacy enhancing technology around understanding and securing your data and giving you that overall compliance and process as well. And the AI, I'm not going to lie, but the AI transformation and the AI boom in the last couple of years did help our cause as well. But we were more focused on getting our hands dirty with the nitty-gritties of data, and that's how kind of the idea came along. How has the journey been? It's been a really good learning curve. I think like you said, we did come from a comfortable position. There's never a dull day in this journey. It's always kind of a learning process, and I think having that learning mentality from the start, where you have to kind of wear different hats over the course of a working day, I would say, is something that was a bit of a journey or a development for myself as well. And at the same time, I think it gives me a lot of satisfaction at the same time to be able to solve a problem that is key in the market and speaking to people that actually see impact from the platform that we are building at the same time. So yes, we've been in operation, I would say, for close to 2 years. We've been in the back end, developing the product and the nitty-gritties of what that looks like as of such. But to be able to actually go out to our clients now and position it in a way that solves, a huge concern for them is, I would say, is a big win for me.
I know, Ranuk, you might not be prepared for this, but if I ask, like, if there are any tips that you can share with fellow founders listening to this today, and after we upload this on YouTube, are there any guidance that you can kind of share? Or it might not be structured because you may not have thought about this, but the things that you learned and the way that you kind of responded to those, so that they don't have to go through the same journey again. The short fix for them.
100%. I'll start with something a little bit philosophical, which kind of I stand by as well. This going on your own journey does really build resilience. The definition of what resilience is something that organizations kind of try to dabble with as well. But I feel like, like coming back to what I said, you have to wear different hats during a day, to having those long nights and, speaking to different people and dealing with different problems. I think that resilience element is something that does really help to be able to kind of keep continuing and keep going on with the journey. You understand your mission better than anyone else. And as long as you kind of keep to that mission and vision and you take the right people along with you, it does kind of, you can progress, and that's how you go. Anything within your organization is your problem. You will feel that in the first couple of years as well. You will obviously have a team that can come together from different angles, but having a in on every corner of what the organization is doing is a key factor. I think in this stage as well. And look, for me, I think one of the biggest learnings that I saw is, we when you're working for another organization, you kind of provided everything. You work with great teams, you work with great platforms, and so on and so forth. But the connections that I've been built, and the people that kind of supported me across this whole journey in the last 2 years, whether it is from a networking perspective or advice on development, has been kind of amazing. And I think I've been lucky in that way as well. But funny enough, there's a lot of people out there willing to help. And I think a lot of founders make that mistake of kind of keeping it to themselves. and not actually going there and, speaking to people who have done this before and so on and so forth. You'll actually be surprised on the amount of people that are, out there who just want to kind of help and, would like to see you succeed in that sense. So in that way, and don't be afraid to build. Like, you have an idea of a product, you have a vision of a product, and you want to keep growing, keep building it as much as you can, and if solve a problem is what I'm saying. You're on mute again, yes, yeah.
We have another question from the audience, although we've kind of moved to a different
All good, no worries at all.
phase, but I'll still pick this question just to make sure that we've responded to every question that our audience has. How do privacy and other teams such as cybersecurity collaborate to ensure holistic protection of sensitive information?
I think that's a really good question. So I've kind of seen what this transformation looks like when data privacy didn't have its own kind of pillar. It would be kind of a component that would sit under IT that no one would care about. And then we saw the transformation of cybersecurity come in, establishing architectures around organizations and so forth. Now, how would they kind of comply? I think the responsibilities are quite clear, where cybersecurity comes in from, establishing the right kind of technologies, the right processes in actually protecting your architecture, whereas data privacy comes from actually looking at your data and saying this is sensitive and this needs to be protected. The teams have to work hand in hand. I think the data privacy teams, or the privacy, the privacy DPO, or the data privacy officer for that matter, more or less comes in from a data governance standpoint, establishes the right processes and, compliance obligations that are needed, whereas cybersecurity would come in from a technology and architecture perspective as well. You also have to understand, like, from a data privacy space, you're playing around with the regulator as well. So the regulation standpoint, where there is actually legal fines that can impact an organization, the risks that come in as well. Both teams have to work hand in hand. The reason I say that is, end of the day, what we're trying to do is prevent data breaches, and also making sure that you're not getting fined or you're not putting any of your clients' data at risk as well. I've seen, companies set up steering committees where, everyone has an oversight, or, of what is happening in that sense. It can't be a siloed process anymore. These teams have to work together. There are key parts that have to come into play, whether it's cybersecurity to data privacy to even legal teams coming into play, your governance teams, and so on. So there are key. I wouldn't say this is something that where cybersecurity and data privacy have to come together. There's key other components within an organization that have to come together to ensure that you're building a fully fledged, kind of establishing a fully fledged process. And that's something that we saw, something that big tech organizations adopted very early on. And I think that's to their kind of credit as well, has been a lot of their success. A lot of the big tech companies have gone through, their own fair share of, data breaches and issues as well. But the fact that they have been able to kind of come out of that is because there has been a coordinated effort. And I think that's something that we are trying to empower a lot of other organizations to do as well.
Thanks, Ranuk. It's our last 5 minutes, so I would like to move more of a personal question, Ranuk. As you said, it's not easy being a founder, right? It doesn't end at 5 o'clock. It doesn't just start at 9 o'clock. It's not a 9 to 5 job, right? And you said you may have to work late nights and talk to different people and all that. And that might also mean there's a toll on your personal life, right? And in your case, you have a young family, you have a kid and all that. How do you manage all this, like from a wellness point of view? I'm not only asking because I want to know about you, but it's also helpful for our community and our audience, so that you give or share some of those tips as to how you balance this tough life of a founder while being a good husband or a good wife, for that matter, if it's a female founder, and being a father, being a mother, being a good family person, and being a good friend to your friends as well.
Yeah, 100%, yes. And I think if you can unmute my wife for give her 5 minutes. She'll do a better explanation of this than me. But look, I mean, for me, I think we started this company and I had a 1 year role as well at the same time. And yes, there is a lot of sacrifice that happens. There is a lot of kind of missed opportunities as well. Sometimes you do, and being very candid here as well, sometimes you do kind of think about the opportunity cost of both angles as of such. Now, going back to kind of from a family perspective, at least, my wife is very supportive. She believes in this idea as well, and is very passionate, as I am, in that sense. The way I think I mean, she always jokes about is like, we don't talk about anything else but in privacy now in our household. Yeah, and LLM anonymization is the only thing that we discuss. So I think in the first year, look, I'm going to be very honest with you. In the first year, the balance is really tough. Especially in the first 2 years, because you are trying to have a normal kind of family life, but at the same time, you're trying to also grow this other baby that you're trying to kind of mature, that needs your focus and time. I think something that I have practiced is, ensuring that there is a couple of hours a day where uh, I, spend time with them and I switch off. It's easier said than done, because there are certain things that need to be done during a day, and people want to meet and so on. But then from Monday to Friday, we do work Saturday and Sunday as well. That's a separate story. But Monday to Friday, at least, it's a practice that I do to switch on, to switch off, and that kind of helps me as well. More or less to kind of take a step away. I come back with better ideas, better thought process as well, rather than kind of like going down the track of not taking a break in that sense as well. So I can lie to you and say I have all the answers in this, but it is a learning process. There are days where your focus is more on the product you're building, or there are days where you'll be more focused on the family that you're building as well at the same time. I've just had the fortune. I've been very fortunate. My wife has been very understanding. She's very passionate about what we're building. She's very passionate about the company as well. And we've had, hats off to her. She's taken a huge kind of responsibility on, especially when I'm traveling and so on, which this job, there is a lot of traveling with. But at the same time, I think, yeah, just finding the right balance from a personal level. Different people have different ways of kind of handling these things. But for me, it's just, making sure that I'm switching off at least a couple of hours a day to focus on my family is how I do it. But the journey is hard, especially in the first year, because you're trying to find that balance. It's a very new space. All I can say is, like I said, as much as resilience is important, making sure you're taking care of yourself, you're there to kind of enjoy some of the successes in the future. These are all key areas I think founders need to think about. And I'm, I don't think a lot of people might like me saying this, but there's this rhetoric where when you start a company, you're working 24/7, and you're not you're driving it, and nothing else matters. And it is true, it does happen like that. But then at the same time, I do personally believe you need to find a really good balance, to kind of stay on top of this and to be able to play the long game. So that's just the way I see it.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ranuk. I think it's extremely important to take care of yourself. I've been a founder myself many years ago.
Yes.
And then, as you know, I also worked with many founders and entrepreneurs, especially women entrepreneurs. At Meta, thousands of them we empowered and trained. And then now I have the opportunity of working with lots of founders and freelancers. And something that I've seen is that necessity to balance off and
100%.
make sure that you do take care of yourself, right? And I've
Yep.
also seen, just like you said, you've seen the good, bad, and ugly. I've
Yeah.
also seen that in this context as well, and
Yes.
founders who've not been able to be happy and stay happy with the family, kids having that relationship with their parents and all that, right? So it can have those negative implications down the line. So I also
100%.
strongly believe in balancing that well. And some of the tips that you gave, I guess, like switching off are important, because there are certain things that can wait, right? There are certain things that cannot wait, then you spend that time, but then certain things can wait and then you switch off. And I've also seen if you build that culture early on, then it can also help you as a founder and the organization. But if you delay setting that culture, you continue to have that culture of not taking care of yourself, and which also might connect to not taking care of employees as well, because employees also follow the founder and work long hours and
No,
everything.
for sure. I think it does have an impact on the culture that you build in the organization. You want to build a workforce that is resilient and is able to play the long game. So, how you kind of take care of yourself and treat yourself and being able to kind of move forward is a key factor in, building that culture within your organization, which I have practiced from a very early stage. And taking work home, you definitely will. Like I said, you speak to my wife, she'll tell you this. We talk about work day in and day out, as we do, but just finding the right balance, what works for you. There is no right answer. That is what I believe in that.
I don't think there's a right answer as well. It's about balancing and being diligent about it, right?
Yes, for sure.
And almost every day being conscious to make sure that you get that balance right.
Yeah,
And it's a continuous process. There's
for
no
sure.
like, okay, this week I work and next week I spend with the
Yeah.
family kind of thing. It doesn't happen
Yes.
in the start
Yeah,
of
it doesn't.
so
Yeah.
it doesn't. All right. So I hope that's useful for our audience as well. Ranuk, thank you very much for your candid conversation on very important topics these days. AI is the talk of the town, obviously, for the last 2 to 3 years. And then you are in the forefront of that, tackling some of the challenges. And then you responded to my questions as well as our audience, our members' questions. Some might have been easy, some tough, but you tackled all of them. Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who joined today as well. And 0 to 1 will happen next week as well as sorry before next week. It happens tomorrow on Thursday as well. Tomorrow we have another founder slash freelancer from India, Rushabh Mota, and to invite you to join that session as well. And then it repeats next week. There are two other founders next Wednesday and Thursday as well. So thank you, everyone. See you around.
Thanks, Asas. Thanks for having me. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.